Our reading this morning is from the Gospel of Luke. What happens just prior to this is important to know, otherwise the rest of the story means nothing. And that is that Jesus has just predicted his death and then invited everybody to be his disciple. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance on his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. Suddenly, they saw 2 men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking about his exodus, which he was about to fulfill in Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but as they awoke, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. And just as they were leaving, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us set up 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah," not realizing what he was saying. And while he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. And they kept silent, and in those days told no one of the things they had seen. Here endeth the reading.
Great Spirit of life, open our hearts, make our hearts good soil. Bless the speaking and hearing of these words, and the silent spaces in between. And help us make sense of them together. Amen. So I know we have a lot of Lord of the Rings fans in this church. So we can kind of think of the Transfiguration as like Jesus going from Gandalf the Gray to like Gandalf the White, like the big glowing thing. And the Transfiguration image, this glowing Jesus, this Jesus all of a sudden lighting up like a lightning bolt, like a flash of light, like a flash of the Spirit, is illustrating him as radiating divine power, as being at one with divine power. And we have stories like this in the scriptures to kind of catch our attention in a particular way. The Transfiguration image might sound to some of us like something out of a movie or a comic book even. And some of us need that or might want that, and others might say, well, what's the point of Jesus lighting up? The Transfiguration image mirrors and contrasts an earlier one in the divine drama illustrated to us in scriptures. Originally, an earlier image of the Transfiguration is the Torah and the commandments and the law of God written in stone, revealed to the people on the mountain. It was a word written in stone. It was a law on paper. Anyone who has gone on to Match.com knows you really can't get to know someone on paper. You have to know someone, you have to be with them, you have to relate to them, you have to interact with them, you have to get a sense of their energy, you have to be in relationship with someone, and the only way to do that is by doing it. When Jesus lights up on the mountain, what the biblical writers are saying to us is Jesus is the living expression of the truth that is ultimately beyond words, the truth that can only come alive in the human heart, in relationship, and with all of us. We hear this expression that like Jesus is the living word, but what the Transfiguration is saying is that truth comes alive and lives in the human heart. The law of God, this new understanding of God that Jesus brings, illustrates and reveals that greater light, the light of God living in the human heart. Truth we see in this image, in this new revelation of the law coming to the people on the mountain. We see that truth can't be contained by one group versus another group. Truth can't be contained or boxed in. It serves the balance of life. It shares power. Truth is not bound up in dogmas. Truth isn't stuck on the pages of a book. Truth can't be contained and limited to rituals and traditions or protocols or purity codes. These things point to truth, perhaps, or they help us be in balance, but ultimately the balance is always changing and truth moves with change. Because truth is alive and moving. Truth relates and lives and breathes and moves and adapts and responds to the present, moving, changing reality of ever-expanding life in the present. And truth knows we're all a part of it. So what is this light? That's the truth that is lit up on the mountain. That's what Christian tradition means when we hear Jesus called a living word, a moving, adaptable word. The God we see on the mountain lit up in Jesus is the God that is change. And change is what makes love possible. Light doesn't shine for itself. It doesn't try to shine, it simply does. It stands out by itself, just as rivers don't drink their own water, and trees don't eat their own fruit, and flowers don't give their own fragrance for themselves. Light doesn't shine for itself. Rather, it illuminates the world just in being itself, and truth is like that, the kind of truth that the story of the Transfiguration is trying to illustrate for us. That living truth is like that. Light doesn't try to shine, it simply does, by being itself. The writer George Orwell once wrote, saying, "In a time of deceit and lies, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. And in times of deceit and darkness, truth illuminates everything just by being itself." And this is why we hear of Jesus shining in this morning's gospel account. In Jesus' own time of imperialism and corrupt power, the authorities of his day, they were trying hard to stand out. They were putting all of their energy in trying to shine brightly, but kind of in that neon light kind of a way that really needs to assert itself. They were trying to shine and stand out with their gold. They were trying to shine and stand out with their big armies. They were trying to shine and stand out with their wealth or their power or their palaces or their towers or their temples. They were even trying to shine by claiming divine authority, by claiming to have control over access to God, control over divine power. And that law was literally kept in a box behind a curtain, and you had to be in relationship with the authorities to access that. But as hard as they were trying, they're not the ones that we hear about this morning shining with the light of God. Maybe you know someone who just has a spark about them. Maybe you can even close your eyes and think about someone who just lights up when you're around them. Maybe you can think of a gathering or a moment or a place where in love and warm, authentic presence, there was a luminous quality to the experience. Without trying, light glows in the dark. Jesus didn't try to shine. He simply loved and taught love in a place where it was scarce. In the storm, he breathed and walked footsteps of peace. Where there was hate and division, he set a table and invited people to eat together and feed each other. Where there was judgment, he offered grace and curiosity and forgiveness. Where there was illness, he offered healing touch and company. When people made others outcasts, he opened their eyes to see children of God. Where others were trying to stand out and show others how powerful they were, he made himself another face in the crowd. He was content being another flower among the lilies of the field. But the amazing thing is that just in doing this, in allowing himself to be himself like that, just by embodying the great love he spoke of as God, he shined so brightly that even as a Galilean peasant, it was impossible to not see him and to not witness his heart as the truth. And we hear of him shining with the power of God, with divine light. His simple truth is so ordinary. It's so ordinary, it's easy to miss. There's an expression in Zen Buddhism that says Zen is like selling water by the river. Jesus' way is like that. Love is God, so love your neighbors as yourself. Even try to love your enemies. It's really simple. So we need to light him up like a Christmas tree, so we pay attention to it. That's sort of what the story of the Transfiguration does for us. For those who want bells and whistles and a clear sign of God's power and presence in our lives, we have stories like this. We have these miracle accounts. But even then, after a miracle or after a big divine shift, it's back to everyday life. It's back to the ordinary. When the world might have us doubting love and compassion and connection as the greatest power. But the story of the Transfiguration in those moments of doubt invites us to consider that maybe God, or what we call spirit, or what we call truth, or divine power, maybe it travels at the speed of light, which is always moving, but it's simply what we are in. Maybe the divine power that we're waiting for is what we're swimming in, what we are. Maybe it's enfleshed in our being and in the flesh of the earth. Maybe it's not something we believe in or point to or pin down or contain, but rather something we be, something we become together, something that illuminates our shared life when we remember who we are and what we are together, which is that light, traveling from light to light. The story of the Transfiguration, of Jesus lighting up, shows us how divine power is wrapped up in ordinary, everyday love. Ordinary, everyday kindness. Ordinary, everyday life. It flies under the radar and yet lights up the universe. through so many small acts, in simple things, in small things. Jesus in his simplicity lit up the world and shows how we, no matter how small we might feel, have the ability to stand in that power, the ability to be and become that great light. Arundhati Roy, the author of The God of Small Things, spoke to this effort. She wrote, our strategy should be not only to confront empire, but to lay siege to it, to deprive it of oxygen, to shame it, to mock it, with our art, our music, our poetry and our literature, our stubbornness, our joy, our bright brilliance, our sheer relentlessness, and our ability to tell our own stories. Stories that are different from the ones we're being brainwashed to believe. The corporate revolution will collapse, she says, if we refuse to buy what they are selling. And maybe some of us participated in the Buy Nothing Day on February 28th. Their ideas, their version of history, their wars, their weapons, their notion of inevitability. And I would add here, in other words, their definition of what shines and what's really shiny. Remember this, Arundhati Roy says, we are many and they are few. They need us more than we need them. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. And on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. And on a quiet, ordinary day, we light up the worlds together with Jesus. Amen.